All right, another one. My manager a few days ago told me that I need to have more structure. I think he said something like, he mentioned that the episodes are too long, which I've heard before, and he said I need more structure. And he's right. And it made me think of something. I remember when Game of Thrones was at its hype. I used to follow Game of Thrones. I used to love Game of Thrones. I think it's the greatest show of all time. By far. Just stop watching after season 5. And I formed this belief at the time where it was coming out. Every week, a new episode. I would look at the runtime immediately. I would go back to the runtime as I was watching it. Oh, I'm only halfway through. There's still halfway to go. Knowing that there's usually a great ending to these episodes. Especially the last one. I was obsessed with the length of the episodes. And I decided that the optimal length of time for an episode, a weekly episode, was between 46 minutes and 52 minutes. To me, that's the sweet spot. Under 46 feels too short. Over 52 feels too long. Now, I know there's people who feel like the longer, the better. I don't. I think 46 and 52 is the best. Which is funny because now for the past 33 weeks, I've been making my own weekly thing, and it never occurred to me. Now, it didn't occur to me partly because my aim was to talk as long as possible. It's partly a kind of duration exercise. How long can I do this? And I've still yet to go as long as I would like to because of lack of planning. So I would like to do 2, 3, as long as I can go, hour episodes. But I think for the bulk of it, I should keep it to the length that I feel is optimal. I mean, that makes sense. So from now on, I have a timer and I won't go beyond 52 minutes. Alright, now that's out of the way. I'll talk about Game of Thrones later, actually. Let me take a note. Okay, I'm not going to write GOT because then I'll have no idea what it means. Second thing, tonight is Fury and Ngannou, Battle of the Baddest. Now, I think there's a kind of a competition between the two sports, especially recently. The idea of which is better. Now, I think MMA is objectively better than boxing for many reasons. Many reasons. But I'll start with, I guess I'll make my prediction. It's in a few hours now. Really, the main thing I want to see, the main thing my brother and I have been talking about for the past few years is, does Ngannou hit harder than Wilder? That's what everyone wants to know. Who's the hardest hitting human being in the world and possibly of all time? In terms of people whom we can name. That's the main thing I want to see. I bet on Ngannou because obviously he's not the favorite, so why bet on the favorite? But, he has a 10% chance of winning. There are so many unknowns. We don't know how hard he hits in comparison to Wilder. And people arguing that Wilder is a better boxer because he's a boxer. He's a professional boxer. He's been boxing since he was 19. I think he's 33 now, 35, 35, I think. So 16 years. The guy can't box. He's a terrible boxer. He can't box. A professional boxer should never throw this punch. Right? That's not a punch. That's not a punch. And no other professional boxer, heavyweight to the lower weight classes, throws this. Okay, it's not a punch. Wilder is not a boxer. He's a puncher. So, I think this argument is stupid. I think Ngannou is a better boxer than Wilder. But does he hit harder? That's the question. Last week was UFC 294. I made my predictions. I said Usman should be the favorite. Now, after that first round, that round was crazy because it definitely made Khamzat look like he's the real deal. A 10-8 on Usman, never done before, and he out-wrestled him. Now it's a different weight class, but Usman is a big guy. He's one of the biggest welterweights. So I don't think the weight is that good an argument. The preparation, okay, 10 days notice, and the fact that he's a 5-round fighter. I think I was right in saying he should have been the favorite, because had it been a 5-round fight, now, apparently, Khamzat hurt his hand. But Khamzat doesn't have the stamina. We've seen it time and time again. Well, no, we haven't. We've seen it against Gilbert Burns, which it was a dogfight, it was brutal. But we saw it with Usman, it felt like he faded. And we know Usman has the 5 rounds in him. So I think I was right in saying Usman should have been the favorite, even on 10 days notice. But Khamzat did his thing, and he got the win. Once again, a really close one. I think that he's not as good as people were expecting him to be, unfortunately. But Usman, he looked great. His only defeat before Leon Edwards was a rear naked choke. And he mentions that he didn't even really know, well, he didn't know jiu-jitsu at the time. And so I thought when Khamzat got his back, I thought, flashbacks, he won't know what to do. And the opposite happened. He showed that he's a true champion, top 10 fighters of all time in the UFC. And he slammed him brutally. Now, it was impressive how he did that, because that was risky. And he lifted him up on his back and threw him down. That was very impressive, very risky, and it worked. And it was impressive that Khamzat didn't let go and apparently broke his hand, but kept the position. So that was a good fight. One thing about Khamzat is that his name is Khamzat, and people in the media seem to mispronounce his name all the time, which I don't get. Now, Uncle Chael, the greatest MMA media person, does it on purpose. But recently I was watching a video by Mighty Mouse analyzing, I guess, doing his picks for whom he thought would win. And he mispronounced his name. And last week I was talking with Alan. We were talking about names. And the week before I was talking with my brother about names. My brother's name is Suleiman. Now, in France, pronouncing his name is not difficult, Suleiman. But in England, people don't know how to do it. And so they usually, if they go for the full name, they'll say Solomon, which is not his name. I call him Susu, his nickname. The family, everyone calls him Susu. And then people outside, people at work, people at uni will give him a nickname, Saul, Sully. And he mentioned that no one calls him by his real name, ever. No one. Which I thought was interesting. Now, at home, no one calls me by my real name. Everyone calls me Abu. At work, people mostly call me Abba. That's a new nickname I had never heard before. They call me Abba. Or they call me Abraham. And a lot of people call me Abraham. So I thought it was interesting that my brother mentioned that no one calls him by his real name, ever. And me on the other hand, I do get called my name a lot of the time. And so we have this different relationship with our names. Don't really know where that's going, don't really know what that means, but I like my name. And it's interesting that when I tell people my name, there's usually a reaction. It's a good name. It's an interesting name. It's a cool name. It's a name of baggage, historical context and such. And I think it's a powerful name. That's why I like it. And I like, in a weird way, I do like hearing it. And so that was 2 weeks ago with my brother, talking about that. And then we talked about it with Alan. We also talked about names, this idea of what your name means to you. So I mentioned to him that I get called, it's too tight. I get called Abraham a lot. And He was talking to me about putting my name in credits, for example, in a music video, for example, if I make a music video for him. And he said, I want you to put your name in there, not something else, a kind of company name or something. He said, your name is, you have a good name. And so I keep going back to this, but I've been told many times in my life that I have a good name, which is funny. I don't know really what to say, but it's interesting to hear. It causes a reaction. It's just, in a way, I feel like I have to live up to my name. It's not banal. It's not a boring name that everyone has. And on top of that, I have been told, literally, throughout my whole life, that I have this powerful name. Abraham. And in a way, it doesn't feel like it belongs to me. It doesn't feel like I've earned it. That's the interesting thing. When I say Abraham, you think of the Bible, you think of Ibrahim, you think of Abraham Lincoln. And so I've been made aware throughout my life, when I say my name is Abraham, that people think of other people, that they think of other things. And so when I say Abraham, in a weird way, I feel detached from it because I feel like I haven't earned it, if that makes sense. I want people to know me as Abraham. I want to earn it. I want to be, in 100 years, when people say Abraham, they'll think of me. That type of egotistical, crazy, narcissistic thing. So I like my name. Now I think Ngannou will KO Fury inside of 6 rounds. And I think that's very unlikely. It's interesting. Ngannou is the heaviest fighter that Fury's ever fought. But when you hear Mike Tyson talking about it recently, I never seen anyone hit anyone so hard. It's not like they were knocked down. It's like the ankles were broken. I should do the whole episode in Mike Tyson's voice. Yeah, Mike Tyson praises Ngannou for his work ethic and his punching power. So if he believes it, which is highly possible, he doesn't, Ngannou might have a shot, and that would finally redeem the MMA in boxing. Which is it's interesting because they're really totally different sports. I rewatched the Fury fights recently, and I rewatched some of Ngannou's fights, and I watched some MMA recently. And they're different sports. They are 100% different sports. The only place where it kind of makes sense is at heavyweight, where punching power is a huge factor. YouTube has decided to throw Tai Lopez my way. I watched a podcast of his. He is extremely entertaining, very good speaker, clearly very smart, educated, eloquent. And I remember seeing him when he was on those videos, probably on YouTube, those annoying videos that so many people did after him, and I don't know if he was the first, just talking really fast, just trying to sell you something. Very annoying, very obnoxious. And I watched this podcast. I thought it's interesting that I've been fed Tai Lopez from this specific angle where it just repelled me. I was not interested in what he was selling. But then seeing him on this podcast where he's trying to sell something, that's just how it works. You're on a podcast, you are on a podcast, you're trying to sell something. He's trying to sell his image. But it worked much better. And he was very compelling, very interesting guy, talks a lot, talks very fast, a lot of ideas. Probably a lot of it is bullshit, but he believes it. And one thing he mentions, once again, out of all the things, I watched a bunch of his videos after that. Out of all the things he mentions, a few have stuck. One specific one is, whatever you want, go straight to it. Which is the opposite of something I said a bunch of weeks ago, which was the title of an episode. Sometimes the long way is the short way. Which I said, especially in relationship to Ngannou getting to fight Fury, interesting enough. And the idea of sometimes the long way is the short way is that sometimes, it's not even sometimes, is that you'll get, it's complicated, but, well, the thing with Ngannou is, would he have been in this situation had he taken a shorter way? Had he gone straight to boxing? Would he be headlining one of the biggest events in history? Because it's in, was it in Dubai or something? And they push so much money into the event. Would he be in that situation? With Ronaldo getting him a watch, with Mike Tyson coaching him. Just this enormous event. Would he be there if he had gone the short way and became a boxer? And as I think it's in Steve Jobs, when a speech he does at some university, talks about how when you're moving forward, nothing makes sense. But when you look back and you connect the dots, in hindsight, everything makes sense. So that's the idea of sometimes the long way is the short way, which my brother hates this sentence. But the Tai Lopez one is whatever you want, go straight to it. So it's the opposite. And the point he makes is that the example he gives is that he knows wealthy people, extremely wealthy people, who are not good with women. So the point he makes is that, well, it's a very old, I think it's an Oscar Wilde quote. Everything is about sex, except sex. Sex is about power. Now, I will humbly say that I disagree with the quote. I think that everything is about power. And in fact, that quote fits with the quote of whatever you want, go straight to it. Because the point Tai Lopez was making is that it's a very popular idea. Men get the car, men get the house, men get the money, the power, the wealth, the status to get the woman. I don't agree. I think that men get the car, the house, the status, and the woman for the power. And so I think everything is not about sex, everything is about power. I think sex is just one of the many things. But the point Tai makes is that these people, they become extremely successful. They get all the status symbols that will attract the women. Once again, the very old idea, you have these birds with all the feathers, they look beautiful, the men, and they look this way to attract the women. Just in the animal world, just animals in general, including humans, the men are trying to get the women. And so they do everything for the women because we have this instinct to procreate and further our bloodline. And maybe I'm different. That's possible. Maybe I'm wrong. That's also possible. But I don't think that I'm not driven by sex, for example. When I was addicted to porn and in that state of mind, I thought I thought that was the ultimate thing, having a woman, having sex. I don't feel that way at all at the moment. I think that power, talking from a man's perspective, I think power is the ultimate thing. And I think that you don't get the power to get the woman. You get the woman because it adds to your power in a way. It makes you feel more powerful. Once again, I digress. Going back to Tai's quote, whatever you want, go straight to it. He talks about these nerds who are extremely wealthy and in their quest to acquire more wealth and therefore more status and therefore be attractive to women, they never practiced on being good with women, on being good at talking to women, attracting women. They have everything except that. And so he talks about how they did this for the women. What they should have done was getting good with women to get the women and work on the other things, right? And I mean, the principle, I don't think the two principles of sometimes the long way is the short way and whatever you want to go straight to it are mutually exclusive. Sometimes one is right, sometimes the other is right. But I think about it in terms of how it applies to me, for example. I want to make films. And when I got out of uni, I thought I'm going to make music videos to work on my craft. And one day possibly I'll get there. or you think you put your movie in you go through all these steps to one day become a filmmaker. And I think probably Spielberg said that, probably many people have said that. To be a filmmaker, you just need to make a film. And so for the past almost three, was it 3? I think I finished uni 3 years ago. Something like that. For the past 3 years, I haven't been making films, but I've been wanting to be a filmmaker, which makes no sense. All I need to do is make a film. That's what I got out of that quote. I can make a film. I have the equipment. I can write a script. I can do everything. A lot of work is involved in that. It's not easy, but I can do it. And so I just need to do it. I don't need to think, oh, one day I'll attract this and it will help me make my film. One day I'll have the funds, everything. You don't need anything to make a film. If you're a filmmaker, you're an artist. If you're an artist, you're creative. If you're creative, you understand that art is problem solving. And I have to make films by any means necessary. And procrastinating is not the right thing to do. Bum, 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 bum. Another thought from last week. Daddy Tate, Andrew Tate, talks a lot about curating your reality. Now, curating your reality is a very complex thing, and I'm realizing now that it's something I've been obsessed with for a long time, since I was a kid. I just didn't know what I was doing. But it seems that a lot of people go through their life. It's interesting, I was writing my statement for uni recently to apply, and one thing I mentioned that I always thought about is that people in the film industry don't think of making films. They don't think of cinema as its own art form. Recently I watched a trailer for Beekeeper, The Beekeeper, with Jason Statham. Wow, I was spitting there. Jason Statham. The Beekeeper is the same movie as a million other movies. He's a beekeeper this time. Next time he's a school teacher. Next time he's a science teacher. Not very original. Next time he's a cab driver. Next time he's a waiter who just so happens to be a psycho who's been in the military at some point and his wife died at some point, and now he's there to bring justice to the world in this small little town where a corporation is fucking people over. This film has been seen 1 million times. Now, if you had to guess what aspect ratio the film is in, you might not even know what aspect ratio is, okay? It's in wide aspect ratio, 2.35 by 1, CinemaScope, right? Because that's just how you do it. That's just how those types of movies are made. If you had to guess the plot, if you had to guess how Jason talks throughout the whole movie in his very deep actor voice. I remember we were watching Person of Interest with my family. It's a fun show. It's pretty good. And the main character is called John, and my mother's ex is called John. He's an actor, and we watched it with him once, and he kept talking about how the main actor is always whispering, and it really fucked the show up for me, because I realized, the main character is always whispering. He's always in this deep, whispery voice to sound more dramatic, always whispering. But going back to the idea that the film industry doesn't see cinema as its own art form, what I mean by that is that they're not trying to progress it in any way. They're just repeating the same things. Now, when you hear that Marvel movies, the fact that you're getting tired of Marvel movies, the fact that they are getting repetitive, the fact that people say every Marvel movie is the same movie, you might not understand just how true that is. Movies have a specific structure. Mainstream movies, especially when you think about the movies you see the poster of, the movies that make the money, the big mainstream movies, they follow exactly the same structure. Now, these ideas that I'm gonna regurgitate are not mine. A lot of it is from Eric Edson, who's a very knowledgeable guy. Some of it is from the South Park creators, David Mamet, bunch of very smart people. The way it works, just as soon as I say, the big blockbuster movie, a movie is going to come to your mind. Just pick a random Marvel movie, okay? They are the same film because they follow the same structure. And on top of that, the characters are the same. right? It's people in costumes, superheroes. They're the same. Now, it wasn't as tiring when every movie was the same and you get a beekeeper, then you get a god, a superhero. It wasn't as tiring. But when the structure is exactly the same and the characters are exactly the same, just in different outfits, that's when it gets really tiring. So you have something called the inciting incident. The inciting incident happens around the 10 minutes mark, almost exactly. I was listening to Paul Thomas Anderson, I don't know exactly in what context, a podcast or maybe breaking down Phantom Thread. He talks about it, and you might not know Paul Thomas Anderson. He's more of an art house filmmaker who makes films not for everyone. Phantom Thread is not a film for everyone. But he's my favorite film director because he understands the structure of movies very well, and he's able to hide these things. Inciting incident, midpoint, third act, and third act climax. These are things that you are very familiar with and that most movies follow to a T, and most movies follow in the same way. Now, the inciting incident, and I'm going to follow the structural idea of Eric Edson. A movie is broken into 24, what he calls hero goal sequences. Approximately 24, between 20 and 25, I think, or 26. Hero goal sequences. The inciting incident happens around the 10 minutes mark. Now, you might think it's an arbitrary number, but even Paul Thomas Anderson, who's making a film that no one will see, it's not true, but that most people won't understand or appreciate or go watch. He understands that at the 10 minutes mark is when the inciting incident has to happen. So it doesn't matter if you're making a boring, what a lot of people might call boring, a boring drama set inside a house, or you're making a huge blockbuster with a lot of CGI. At the 10 minutes mark, you have your inciting incident. So the first 10 minutes, you set up your character. The character is the character. It's also the world they're inhabiting. The 10 minutes is all about how this character's life is at the moment, his comfort zone. That's where he lives, right? At the 10 minutes mark, approximately, you get your inciting incident where something happens that pushes the character out of their comfort zone. You think about, I could just name a movie at random, The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf arrives. And some movies will stretch that 10 minutes more than others. If you have a 3-hour movie, you might spend more time there. But the reason you need to have this inciting incident happen at the 10 minutes mark is because otherwise people will get bored. Because the first 10 minutes usually are not that exciting. They are exciting in the sense that they are novel. Every minute, something new is happening. The movie just started, so you're getting introduced to the characters, their names, their life, blah, blah, blah. So you get that initial boost from the fact that everything is new. But around 10 minutes, you need to spice things up. You need to actually start the movie. So, Lord of the Rings, I don't know, every single Marvel movie, Avatar, I don't know, a bunch of movies. At the 10 minutes mark, Gandalf arrives. Now, Gandalf represents the adventure world. Gandalf represents getting outside of your comfort zone. And so when this inciting incident happens, your main character is shown that there is an adventure world out there. There's something different. But that's not where the movie really starts. It's something that I didn't know until I read Eric Edson. I think most people know about the inciting incident, but he calls it the stunning surprise number 1. And what that is the moment your character decides to accept to go into the adventure world. So at 10 minutes, I haven't seen Lord of the Rings recently. I don't know when it happens. But let's say at 10 minutes, what is he? He's not a witch, a sorcerer, a wizard. The wizard arrives and knocks at your door. Hey dude, we need to go on an adventure. You need to leave your comfort zone. That's at the 10 minutes mark. I don't know, we'll stick to the wizard. And then, there isn't a specific time, but pretty shortly after that, the character will say, okay, that's stunning surprise number 1. Something happens, and the character decides, fine, I'll go on the adventure. Once again, Spider-Man, 10 minutes, he gets bitten, and at some point he realizes, okay, I need to do something with that. I need to go into the adventure world. I need to leave my comfort zone. So the inciting incident doesn't push the character out of their comfort zone. They have to decide to do so. The inciting incident, something happens that lets them know, well, something happens that pushes them outside of their comfort zone. But the stunning surprise is when they decide, they make the choice, I'll go through with this. The inciting incident is you hear a noise, you're alone at home, you hear a noise. Yo! Aucune idée. No. The inciting incident is you hear a noise in the attic, right? The stunning surprise is you decide to go into the attic and you discover that an elf is a bruised elf, a beautiful blonde hair lady elf with a lot of bruises is up there in your attic, and you decide, okay, I'm gonna do something about it. Then you have your midpoints, your third act, your climax, etc. And so all films follow that. Now, following that is not the problem. The problem is when you don't experiment with that. I think it was this year that I watched There Will Be Blood and was able to see these structural plot points being executed. And I realized, oh, Paul Thomas Anderson is following the same book as all the Marvel movies. But he's not saying, hey, at the 10 minutes mark, a wizard arrives and says, hey dude, you should go on an adventure. Or at the 10 minutes mark, a radioactive spider arrives and bites the character. And then at 15 minutes, the character said, all right, I'll go on this adventure. He's much more subtle about it. That's his genius, is that he follows the structure, but you are not aware of it because you're so engrossed in the experience. Now, going back to this idea that the film industry doesn't see cinema as an art form, cinema brings together many art forms. Cinema is storytelling. We've been telling stories since the dawn of time. Cinema is acting. Actors have existed long before cinema. You know, cinema, you have music, you have all these things. Now, editing is something that is inherent to cinema. Editing only happens in cinema. Editing, cinematography, as in the camera moving, blocking, lighting for a scene that the camera will move. That's cinema. And these things are not being experimented with. People are just following the checklist. The inciting incident at 10 minutes. The camera moves in the same way every time. Fuck, I don't remember why I started talking about this. Gosh darn it. I guess I'll give an example of how I feel. I have countless examples. One that I have, as an artist, you feel I feel very reticent to tell my ideas. I think it's a normal thing. Oh, someone's gonna steal it. But fuck it. One idea I have is the dolly zoom. The dolly zoom is, you might know it from music videos, you might know it from Jaws. That's one of the most famous and earliest uses, might be the first one, I'm not sure, of the dolly zoom. The dolly zoom is what happens when you zoom and you move the camera at the same time. Now, you can zoom in and move the camera back at the same time. You have to do it in sync, or you can do the opposite. You can zoom out and move the camera forward. Now, what happens when you do this is very complex. When you see it in Jaws, it's very in-your-face obvious. Oh shit, that's what it means. In Jaws, I'm pretty sure it zooms. I'm not sure at all because I haven't seen the movie. I've only seen the shot a few times and a bunch of shots on the movie. But I think what makes sense if you're trying to do an oh shit moment is that the camera would zoom in. Yeah, the camera zooms in and moves out at the same time. What happens when you do that? If the field of view is wide, the background is far. if the field of view is narrow, the background gets crushed. So in that shot, it looks like the background is getting closer to the character, right? What's happening is that the camera is moving back, therefore it has to zoom to keep the same field of view, therefore it's cropping essentially on the image, and it looks like the background is closer. So what this tool does, if you use a wide, I mentioned this for the podcast, for example. I used to use a wide angle closer to me. Now you can, if I do that, you can feel when I move my hands, it feels more personal. With this, I'm using my camera, my lens at its longest field of view. Therefore, it looks more like it feels more static, like I'm anchored into the bed. There's more distance between us because the camera is physically further away. You could get the same field of view, as in as much, you could get a similar shot. I could frame myself, you'd have this, but put the camera here on a wide angle, and it would feel very, very different. So the idea I have is cinema is its own art form. A dolly zoom only exists in cinema. A film where the dolly zoom is occurring through the entirety of the movie, which means that it's a long take, the whole movie. There's no cuts. So what I visualize is we shoot it in a huge hangar. How do you call it? An airplane, a warehouse, a huge empty warehouse. We have a stage, like as if it's a theater performance. We put the camera on rails. The camera starts at 300 millimeters, very far from the stage, very zoomed in, and the camera is framing only the stage, right? Let's say the movie is an hour and a half. Throughout the 1 hour and a half, the camera is moving forward and the lens is zooming out. So what that does is you probably won't be able to tell, especially over an hour and a half. Because we are zooming out, what you're seeing is exactly the same. It's the stage. You're seeing exactly the same thing. But what you are feeling, and you might not be able to understand, is that the camera is getting closer. So the goal is to make you feel like you're entering the experience or the scene more and more as the movie progresses. So that's one idea. And possibly towards the very end, I don't know how. No, actually that would be possible. Towards the end, when the camera is on its widest, at its widest, and essentially the camera, you imagine the stage is here, the camera started here. So physically you're very far from what's happening. At the end of the movie, the camera's here. You're in the stage. So I imagine possibly the camera being on a gimbal and being able to move inside the stage at the end of the movie and really immerse you in it. I think in terms of experience, I think that would be extremely thrilling. This idea that, once again, you don't feel it. If you don't understand camera equipment and cinema that well, which most people don't, it will feel like you will feel at the start like you're far from what's happening on the screen, because that's just how naturally we get that. You'll feel like there's a distance, and you won't understand why. But as the story progresses, you'll feel less and less distance. Once again, you won't be able to understand why. And then at the climax, boom, the camera is picked up and starts going inside of the stage, moving through the characters. Maybe it's a very intense scene. And once again, you won't be able to tell what's happening, but you will feel it. It's very hard for me to say you will feel it. Fucking English, man. Not my first language, and it shows. So that's one idea. I have many other ideas like this, where the goal is, what can I do only with cinema? When I try to write a movie, I'm not trying to write a script that will then be filmed. I'm writing a movie. I'm thinking about the editing, the cuts. And it's obvious when you see a Paul Thomas Anderson, for example, that that's how he writes his movies. I've read, I think, all of his scripts. That's how he writes a movie. He writes a movie. When you see fucking Black Panther 12, Spider-Man 16, those people are not writing a movie. They're writing a script and then they're shooting it. And I mean, we're not even going to go into those movies, which are so compromised in terms of artistry because they have an agenda. They can't say something. I mean, let's not talk about that. But when you watch most movies, what I feel is a lack of inspiration. They are very uninspired. Fucking Beekeeper. Really? The Beekeeper? He's a beekeeper who shoots people? Stupid. So what I'm trying to get at is that cinema as an art form can be pushed in so many directions when you think about the tools you have available. So I think the dolly zoom idea, if it works, could be very interesting. And since I have these types of ideas and many more, when I go to the cinema and see, okay, they shot CinemaScope on anamorphic, same plot, same thing happens, I think, what's the point of making more movies? That's why I love cinema, because it's a young art form. It's a baby art form. The potential is immense, and I really need to work on this idea of the film industry doesn't treat cinema as an art form. I should write down all the examples I have, because it's not coming through right now. It's not clear what I'm trying to say. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that they settled. They're making the same movie over and over again. The same 3 movies over and over again. And they're not trying to move forward. Well, cinema is very expensive. That's probably why it moves so slowly. I mean, that is mainly why, I guess. Makes sense that it would be. Okay, so now that I have a timer, I'm realizing that it's been a while already that I've been speaking. I'll talk about none of these things I could talk about for less than 6 minutes, so gonna end it here. Structure. I need to work on structure. Structure. In general, in my life, and in my podcast. These things go hand in hand. When I'm able to structure my life more, it will come through in the podcast. I need to go back to the poems. Okay. Since no one watches these, I'll just try to recite a poem I have already recited. See if I can remember it. The one I like the most. Which, I don't remember the title. It's by Charles Baudelaire. Is it L'Homme et la Mer? Possibly. Alright. Wow. Homme libre. Toujours, tu chériras la mer. La mer est ton miroir. Tu contemples ton âme, dans le déroulement infini de sa lame, et ton esprit n'est pas un gouffre moins amer. Tu te plais à plonger au fond de ton image. Tu l'embrasses, des yeux et des bras, et ton cœur se distrait quelquefois de sa propre rumeur, au bruit de cette plainte, indomptable et sauvage. Vous êtes tous les deux ténébreux et discrets. Homme, nul n'a sondé le fond de tes abîmes. Ô mère, nul ne connaît tes richesses intimes, tant vous êtes jaloux de garder vos secrets. Et cependant, voilà des siècles innombrables que vous vous combattez, sans pitié ni remords, tellement vous aimez le carnage et la mort. Ô lutteur éternel, ô frère implacable. All right, thank you.